Hello and welcome to Inside Report. I'm your host, Bruce Schlussman. With me today we have Representative Gaetz, who's here to talk about the Mueller report fallout and everything that happened. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for coming to chat.
Of course. So I want to start with that kind of awkward moment in that hearing with Nadler where you seemed to mute your mic. Do you want to tell us what kind of happened there?
Well, the House Judiciary Committee has a rich history of allowing members to express their views and ask questions. And what we see now is a real departure from that practice under the leadership of Chairman Nadler. I think I know the reason why. In the Democratic Party right now, you've got a real fracture. You've got the pipe-swinging progressives who were ready to, indict or impeach President Trump the moment the ink was dry on his election victory certificate. And then you've got folks like Nancy Pelosi and some of the more establishment leadership who want to have something that looks like impeachment but isn't. And so Nadler's having to manage that conflict within his own party, and the result has been a real degradation of the ability of us to be able to get a sense of where we're going. At the time when my mic was cut off, I was trying to understand why the chairman was imposing restrictions on the witness and creating conditions that really had not been created before. And in my experience, when people are unwilling or unable to stand and answer questions, it shows that their motives and their actions and their leadership has eroded.
All right, well, thank you for clearing that up for us. But with the Mueller report, what did it say and not say? Because there's been so much speculation in the media and just kind of all over the place there. As someone who's kind of our experts in the Judiciary Committee, do you want to tell us a little bit about that report?
Sure. I accept the findings of the Mueller report as it relates to the extensive nature of Russia's attempts to interfere with our election. But that is a wholly separate question from whether or not President Trump or any members of his team did something illegal or wrong or engaged in a criminal conspiracy with Russia to undermine the election. And so I think that Mueller was right in his analysis that Russia is a threat. I think that we need to continue to build our resiliency in that regard. But there was no there. There was never evidence that the president engaged in this activity that so many Democrats were accusing him of. So then you get to this question of obstruction of justice. And I recall vividly my conversations with the president as he was fielding these lies and accusations about what he had done, as he was trying to lead the world to a nuclear-free Korean peninsula, as he was trying to leverage China into the right type of trade relationship. And he didn't have all the tools at his disposal because of this hoax of an investigation on Russian collusion. And so he was frustrated, he was concerned, and I think there were times when he likely expressed that frustration to members of his team. That is not obstruction of justice. And so then we get from the Mueller report something that is less of an investigative document laying out facts and more of an answer to a law school essay exam where Mueller is opining about the nature of Article 2 in the Constitution and how obstruction of justice interplays with various facts. There was no charge for obstruction from Mueller. There will be no charge for obstruction from the Department of Justice. And so with that conclusion, no criminal conspiracy, no collusion with Russia, and then no charge on obstruction of justice, it's my hope we can close the book on the Mueller investigation and really probe how we got here in the first place, how we allowed our country to be torn apart for 22 months built on a lie.
Do you think there'll be subsequent investigations with investigating the investigators?
It is undeniable that we are investigating the investigators now, and with good reason. Under the leadership of Jeff Sessions, you sort of had the inmates running the asylum over at the senior leadership of the Department of Justice. Jeff Sessions was not a strong leader. He was not the head of the Department of Justice as the Attorney General. He functioned more as an employee over there. Now we've got a real Attorney General. And Attorney General Barr understands that the politics of the moment can't guide whether or not we will allow our institutions to be degraded by this type of political activity. So I think there are really three layers of what the investigations of the investigators will include. I think first, the leaks. You had pervasive leaks coming out of the FBI, and I want an FBI that investigates facts, that brings cases, not an FBI that thinks that it's their job to shape public opinion. And under the leadership of Jim Comey and Andrew McCabe, the FBI became sort of like a convoluted PR machine rather than an investigative body. So I think we got to investigate that. Second thing we're going to do to investigate the investigators will be the fraud before the secret FISA courts. And I know your viewers are very sophisticated. They followed that closely. It frankly was Judicial Watch that did a lot of the litigating to try to unlock the facts that showed the bias that led into that proceeding before a secret court, where information was improperly used, was misrepresented, was not provided the proper context about the lies and foreign influences that had gone into the underlying dossier that was really the foundation of the investigation. And then the third area that I think we'll look into are the corrupt motives that germinated out of the Obama White House. I mean, you continued to see text messages, again, that Judicial Watch helped us obtain, between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page referencing the Obama White House, referencing then President Obama. And so we've got to learn if Clapper and Brennan and Sally Yates, other people involved with the Obama administration, were allowing their bias against the president to manifest in a corrupt investigation.
So I want to circle back to some of those bad actors that we've been talking about. One that wasn't mentioned yet, but Rod Rosenstein, he's gone yet. Do you think that helps at all? Do you think him leaving helps solve some of the problem at the DOJ?
I was long a critic of Rod Rosenstein, and the reason is that he was not forthcoming with information about some of the underlying bias that seemed to pollute these investigations. I was particularly troubled that when Congress would ask for documents, under Rod Rosenstein's leadership, there would be redactions from those documents that weren't based on national security or sources and methods. It was just embarrassing stuff that the FBI didn't want the people to know. Stuff like the fact that Andrew McCabe spent $60,000 on a desk. You know, I mean, there's no national security basis to withhold that. And so as we continued to catch Rod Rosenstein being less than forthcoming, we lost confidence in him in the Congress, and his continued service to the Department of Justice was untenable.
So after the Mueller report drops and the Barr press conference and then eventually the release of the Mueller we saw so much of a circus, what it appeared. Do you want to tell us your thoughts on kind of that whole circus and that whole fallout that came from the Mueller report?
Sure, and I'm grateful that the Attorney General always was faithful to his commitments during his confirmation to lean hard into transparency and full disclosure. Our viewers will remember that after Mueller had delivered the report to Barr, there was all kind of calamity around the allegations that Barr would redact everything. We wouldn't get to see anything. It would be his views, not Mueller's. Barr releases 92% of the Mueller report. I think that should have silenced his critics. It didn't, frankly, because they didn't like the conclusion. Right? I mean, a lot of folks on the left really believed that this Mueller investigation was going to show that Donald Trump was an agent of the Russian government. We knew that was ludicrous, but when they were let down by the results, they blamed the messenger.
Nadler and kind of what's happened yet. We talked a little bit about that fallout and how they're just going to continue with these investigations. We've mentioned a little bit about that. Do you want to tell us a little bit about those investigations and kind of the quest for Trump's tax returns and subpoenas and all of that?
Yeah, this is sort of like following the bouncing ball. First it was that he was an agent of the Russian government. False. Then it was, he'd obstructed justice. No charges. Yeah. Now they're digging into the president's finances, his tax returns, his blood type, his sperm count, whether or not he uses Propecia. I mean, I think that this is the level of absurdity that we have now reached as it relates to President Trump's life, and it feels like we're on the same witch hunt. We've just chosen a different broomstick in these bizarre investigations, but there is real risk to Democrats that they're overplaying their hand here. I think most people out there in the country, they want to live prosperous lives, they want our country to do well, and they see these efforts to distract the president as an effort to undermine the country, because we're not at our best when our president is constantly having to deal with these bogus and kind of haywire theories that continue to be concocted by Democrats in Congress.
So where does Congress and groups like Judicial Watch go from here?
We would not be in the position we are today absent the work of Judicial Watch. I am constantly amazed at how much power we have in the Congress and how poorly we use it. And then, by contrast, a group like Judicial Watch uses the full complement of powers before the court to try to unlock truths. That's what Judicial Watch really does. And so
Absolutely.
I believe that the work of Judicial Watch will be even more important going forward, because you will see even more bogus attempts to undermine the president as we move forward. And the more transformational the change is that erupts from the Trump presidency, I think the more ludicrous the allegations will be. And that's why we need groups like Judicial Watch to go and get into court, roll up your sleeves, and litigate these questions about what the public has the right to know.
Well, thank you so much for coming by and kind of walking us through this issue.
Great, thank you.
Of course. Thank you for joining us on Inside Report today. If you like this video and other videos, please subscribe to us on YouTube, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and of course, go to our website, watch other videos, and support our work. Thank you for joining us here today.